Entry-level contracts. What are they and what do they mean for the Penguins draft picks? We're going to talk about that right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. You can also give our Instagram account a follow at LockedOn_Penguins. And of course, as always, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Hunter, we are at the time of the NHL offseason where the news is not exactly coming in fast and furious. There's not a whole lot for us to break down that we haven't already broken down. But the news did drop that the Penguins have signed one of their first round picks, Ben Kindel, to a 3-year entry-level contract. And because we're at this point of the offseason, the same kind of question comes up when it gets to this point. When a prospect, a draft pick, whomever, signs an ELC, the question is always, what does this mean for the player? What does it mean for the organization? And while a lot of people who listen to our show do know that, there are still plenty who don't quite know what all the rigmarole and jargon around contracts and contract meanings is. So let's take this first segment to talk about that. Kindel, 3-year entry-level deal with the Penguins. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people kind of forget or don't understand. This doesn't mean that Kindel's going to be on the Penguins in October. It doesn't mean he's going to make his NHL debut this season. It doesn't even mean he's going to make his NHL debut next season. The type of contract that Kindel is on is a 3-year entry-level contract, but it does not truly go into effect until he plays 10 NHL games. He is still eligible to go back to his junior team, which by the sound of it, that's what's going to happen next year unless he comes into training camp and absolutely lights the world on fire. And then, much like a player we've talked about quite a bit this week in Harrison Brunick, he can play up to 9 games at the NHL level before his contract kicks in. Once he plays game 10, the ELC is in effect and the clock has begun. This has happened in the Penguins' history before. Not really all that recently, but the last one that I can remember is Daniel Sprong back in 2015. He was a first-round pick. They signed him to an ELC. He ended up playing, I think, 15 games that year with the club, and then they sent him back to junior, which you are allowed to do. The difference is because of the NHL-CHL agreement, the player can't go to the American Hockey League. So in Sprong's case, he played 15 games, was sent back to junior, but they burned a year of his entry-level deal. So that is essentially what an ELC means for a player. For Benjamin Kindel, it feels like this is another player who is going to spend next season, if not the year after, in juniors.
It's just good for the Penguins to get this part of the business out of the way. You sign him to the 3-year entry-level deal. It'll kick in once he plays 10 games. There's a 99.99999% chance that he goes back to junior after training camp, unless, as you said, he lights camp and preseason on fire and the Penguins want to give him a 9-game look. But again, I think that's way more unlikely right now. I think he may have a good camp, but the Penguins will be like, hey, thanks for being here. Go back to junior. You're still only 18 years old. Light it up down there. Maybe we can revisit this next season when you're 19 years old, or even, maybe even the season after. So I think it's a little premature to say that he's going to be on the opening night roster as of right now. It's just good for the Penguins to get this business out of the way. I would think Bill Zonin is next to get an ELC. Horkov is going to be a bit later, but remember, he's playing for Michigan this year. So once an NCAA player signs an ELC, like Issac Howard did, and more on that coming up in the second segment, once a player signs an ELC, that player has to turn pro. So for Issac Howard, Pat, he was going to play at Michigan State for the 25-26 season. He gets traded to Edmonton. He signed an ELC. He's turning pro now. So with Horkov, they're going to wait a little bit with him just because he's going to spend this season at least at Michigan. I think he might spend another full season in Michigan before the Penguins want to ink him to an ELC. By the way, for Daniel Sprong, just want to make sure we have full clarity. He played 18 games in the 15-16 season, had 2 goals before the Penguins sent him back down to his junior team. So you were right around there, but just wanted to have the full clarity for the audience here. But yeah, it's a good piece of business for the Penguins to get done. There was no reason for this to drag on. And again, I would expect Bill Zonin's ELC to get done probably pretty soon as well.
That's where I am as well. I think you kind of hit the hierarchy correctly. Kindel obviously was going to be the first domino to fall. Zonin will be next. And I would honestly be a little surprised if we see Horkov signed at all, because I think with him, you're probably going to wait till if he goes to Michigan next year and has an elite year, plays really well, leads the team in several categories, maybe even gets a Hobey Baker nom. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's probably what would lead them to sign him next offseason. But I agree with you in the overall sense that they probably want to give him 2 full years at Michigan to really hone his skills, develop, and become the kind of player they want him to be, rather than rush his development, which again, on the other hand, if he goes and lights it up this year, that might have to be something they revisit next offseason. But that's the kind of player that I see them keeping his rights, keeping them him in their back pocket. And once he does have a successful NCAA career over a couple of seasons, they'll probably look to bring him in either at the AHL or even NHL level. As for Kindel, I look at him and I see a player who they really obviously like. You don't take him that high if you're not into the kind of player he is. We talked about this briefly in the shadow of the draft. You look at a lot of the players they took, especially in the first 2 rounds, it's players that have pretty impressive statistical numbers. You look at Kindel, the way he's done since 2023, 50 goals, 159 points in 134 career games in the WHL. I think they want to see him build off of that this year. You look at how much he's grown year over year in his junior career, and you see a player on a pretty good upward trajectory. And with Kindel, if he can go back this year and have a better year than he had last year, then I think next year they start having the discussions of, do we want to give him this tryout, which by next season, he'll probably be ready or be available to do more than just get the 9-game tryout. But you look at the way he has progressed and grown. I think they want to see him do that for 1 more year and then start talking about how he can turn pro.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think 1 more year where he really dominates in the WHL with the Calgary Hitmen. I mean, this past season, again, he had 35 goals, 99 points in 65 games, one of the best players in the WHL this year. If he goes there, dominates once again, even after having a really good camp of preseason with the Penguins, I think the organization, the coaching staff will look at it next year thinking like, okay, we just saw you dominate. Now we're thinking you could be ready potentially, but you still need to earn that spot. Again, this year, too soon. Next year, maybe. I'm still of the opinion, though, that it might take 2 more full seasons before he's up in the NHL. And with where the Penguins are in the rebuild, I don't really think that's too much of a bad thing at all.
No, and that is a good place to leave this segment. When we come back, a player Hunter and I talked about a couple of months back that could have potentially been a target on the trade market for them is no longer a target on the trade market for now. We'll see what happens with his career. Never say never, but at least for now, the original trade target is off the board. We will talk about that when we come back right after this. But first, we've got to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I have brought this up on the Monarch Money ad multiple times. The biggest thing for me is the all-in-one convenience. I'm not switching between credit card apps, my banking app, spreadsheets, Google Drive docs, all that kind of stuff, keeping an eye on my finances. It's all right there in Monarch Money, a one-stop shop, and it saves me time and helps me keep my financial house in order. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes as always. And Hunter, we love playing Be a GM mode here on Locked On Penguins. It's one of our favorite things. We love to identify trade targets and talk about how the Penguins can get them. And one of the players we looked at a few weeks ago, might have been a few months ago, who knows, time is relative at this point, but we were looking at Michigan State's Issac Howard. He was unhappy with his position in the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. He wanted to turn pro, wanted to play NHL games. Looked like a guy that Kyle Dubas and company could really use in this rebuild. But unfortunately, the Edmonton Oilers have snagged him in a 1-for-1 trade of prospects. Tampa Bay gets center Sam O'Reilly. The Oilers get Issac Howard. Howard then, as you alluded to in the first segment, signs an ELC with Edmonton, making him a pro. So he will likely get to play for them this year. And let's start with this. I know that a lot of our listeners and a lot of Penguins fans are going to see this trade between the Oilers and Lightning and think, why didn't Kyle Dubas pull the trigger on this? Here's the reason. Sam O'Reilly was basically Edmonton's top prospect. That was a guy that he might not have been number one on their board, but if he wasn't number one, he is pretty close. It's a good player with a bright future, but he's still probably a year or two away from becoming an NHL player. And as we know, Edmonton is in complete win now mode. They're also one of the few teams facing a salary cap crunch. So getting someone like Issac Howard, who could potentially play NHL games in effective minutes on that deal, is something they really badly need. For the Penguins, you look at their prospect pool and you were probably going to have to give up maybe Koivunen, maybe Harrison Brunick, and where they are in their rebuild, I'm not quite ready to part with those guys yet.
Yeah, some people have kind of asked me on social media, like, who would be like the Penguins version of Sam O'Reilly? And it's like, I'm not really sure they have that version right now, because Rutger McGroarty and Ville Koivunen, they're going to be in the NHL this year. Like, they showed that they were ready. Like, this trade kind of reminded me of last year's McGroarty for Jaeger trade. And, you know, credit to the Lightning for getting some really good value for Issac Howard, because, you know, even though he was set to be a UFA next year, like, as the days, you know, get closer, like, you start losing some leverage, even though, again, you have basically a year at the time. So for the Lightning to get a prospect as good as Sam O'Reilly, that's a really nice job. And you're right. I just don't think the Penguins were willing to give up one of their top guys that are going to be in the NHL this year, whether that's Rutger McGroarty, Ville Koivunen, even outside of that. I don't think they were willing to give up Harrison Brunick, and I kind of agree with them. Like, there's a chance that he could make the NHL squad as soon as this year. We'll have to see. Even someone like Owen Pickering, I'm not sure they wanted to give him up either, considering that I think they see him as NHL ready heading into this upcoming season. After those four, Pat, what do you really have to offer? You're not trading Sergei Murashov. That's ridiculous. You're not trading Yoel Blomqvist. Tristan Brose, I mean, the Lightning are just getting shafted in that kind of trade. Like, and I like Tristan Brose, but he's not on the level of Issac Howard. Let's be real here, people. So when you get past some of those big three or the big four, if you want to call it, of, McGroarty, Koivunen, Brunick, and Pickering, Penguins just really don't have much to offer to the Lightning in that situation. I think they would have maybe liked to gotten him on a discount for a trade, but they weren't going to trade any of those big four. And obviously, Pat, they're not going to trade anyone that they just drafted in the 2025 NHL draft, especially in the first round when they got Horkovs on and Kindel. That just wasn't going to happen. So I think that's the main reason why they just really couldn't pull this off. O'Reilly, he just had a really good year for the London Knights in the OHL. 28 goals, 71 points in 62 games. He is still only 19 years old. I think he projects as a potentially solid top 9 center in the NHL. I think he's a little bit further off right now than Issac Howard. Howard is going to have a really good opportunity to make this team this year for the Oilers. And when you're up against the cap like they are after their big moves and they still have to pay Connor McDavid, you need to take chances on players like this that have done really well in college. Again, he was expected to play at Michigan State this year if he wasn't traded. Now that he signed his ELC, that supersedes that NCAA commitment, and Michigan State is going to lose a really good player. They also just lost out on Gavin McKenna, so they're not having a good 24 hours here, Pat.
No, it's been a rough couple of days for Michigan State. They obviously don't get Howard back. They're not going to get Gavin McKenna, but to your point, I like that comparison of McGroarty for Yeager last summer. And I think last year the Penguins were in better position to do something like this because they were still in the midst of making a lot of deals to get more draft picks, to get younger players. And they were able to speed up, not by much, but speed up this rebuild by getting someone who was more NHL ready than Braden Yeager. Obviously, Rucker McGroarty plays some games this year. He looks like he could make the leap to being a full-time NHLer this upcoming season. And while I know a lot of people right now are saying, well, wouldn't this kind of be the same deal? Yes and no. I think I look at it this way. Edmonton had the better leverage than the Penguins would, wherein Edmonton doesn't need their top prospects right now because they are looking to win a Stanley Cup. You go to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals. You're where the Penguins were 4 or 5 years ago. The future does not matter. If and when.
Well, even further back than that, I wouldn't say 4 to 5, but keep going.
You think like 19, 20, 21, the Penguins are still aiming to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Okay.
Right now, the Oilers, I would say, if we're going to make the direct comparison, the Oilers are the 15, 16, 17 Penguins, where they are in complete win now mode. They've just been to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. They want to win now. So for them, giving up Sam O'Reilly is not a problem for them. For the Lightning, they had a depreciating asset that they needed to move. He didn't want to stay there. They pretty much told him, you're not going to play NHL games this year. And with Edmonton, he's able to go somewhere where he might slot in right away, and not only slot in right away, play on a team that could make another deep run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. In Pittsburgh, there's a world he could have gone the same route as Rutger McGroarty, where, okay, they'll promise me pro playing, but it might be 5-6 games to start the year. I'm going to spend the rest of the year in the AHL, and then maybe at the end of the year, I'll get 8, 9, 10 games. So I do think at this juncture, the Penguins could have made a trade for him, but it would have taken away from what they have been trying to do. And while you might get a better prospect in Howard than Koivunen or McGroarty, you're taking one away and you're making another gamble. And I just don't think they wanted to do that right now.
The McGroarty for Yeager trade worked out just because McGroarty was a lot closer to playing than Yeager, and that is still very much true today. You saw at the end of the season, McGroarty, I think, is ready for full-time NHL action, and in my opinion, I think he's going to be a better full-time NHLer than Yeager. That's why, to me, that trade made so much sense at the time, and it still does today. If you do a Howard trade for a McGroarty or a Koivunen, how much better are you truly getting? Because, those two players that the Penguins have, they are ready for the NHL. Howard, He might be, you just have to see. So again, there's that risk involved when you consider a trade like that. Even Harrison Runick, like the Penguins really like him, on the right side. They feel like there is a chance that he could potentially be NHL ready if he has another good camp and preseason. Do they want to take that risk and move one of those three, or even Owen Pickering, who also got a taste of NHL action last year? Again, that's what it would have to be like. If any of those players weren't in play, same with Sergei Murashov, any of those five, and the Lightning were looking for something else in return, it would have made more sense to the Penguins. But, looking at this type of return, the 1-for-1, I don't think it would have been worth it for the Penguins to give up any of those big three, big four. And when it comes to a, full comparable, like to Sam O'Reilly, the Penguins just don't have, that type of prospect in the system. Like McGrory and Koivunen, they're already in the NHL. Riley, he's not. So there you go.
And that's the last thing I want to add before we head to our final segment, is that you look at McGrory and Koivunen, and I think we can say with a good amount of certainty, they are NHL ready. Are they going to be completed products? Not even close. No. But it would be genuinely stunning if they weren't on the opening night roster. McGrory, it might be a question mark because he's working his way back from injury, which that always screws up timelines. But giving one of them up, and let's operate under the assumption that they are both going to make the team out of camp. You give one of them up for Howard, and if you find out it's similar to McGrory last year, where we think he's NHL ready, he goes through camp, maybe gets a cup of coffee, and then you go, damn, he's not quite ready. We got to put him in the AHL. You've given up essentially an NHL ready prospect for one that's not quite there. And now that wouldn't be the worst of things for the Penguins, considering they're still a few years away, but you don't want to take that half a step back when you've already taken that step forward with this group. So realistically, it would have been nice, but now knowing the price of the trade, I think it's probably for the best that the Penguins didn't make this kind of deal with Tampa Bay, considering where both franchises, now all three franchises, when you loop in Edmonton, are right now. But that is going to do it for our middle segment. When we come back, we got to talk a little of Evgeni Malkin, because you can talk about Gino's play, you can talk about the aging curve and all of that, but there's one thing that's kind of screwed our boy over the last few years, and we will talk about that when we get back right after this. Back here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins, I'm Patrick Damp, running alongside the illustrious Hunter Hodes. Not only is he the illustrious Hunter Hodes, as you may or may not know, he is the Hockey News' newest contributor, covering the Pittsburgh Penguins for the Hockey News. And Hunter, I'm going to do this a lot during the offseason and probably in season as well, because when you work with someone you like, when you got a friend on the show, you like to promote their work. And that's what we're going to do right now. You have a piece you dropped yesterday on the Hockey News. Evgeni Malkin should have better line mates this year. And we're not going to pull the wool over our own eyes here. Evgeni Malkin has regressed. He's going to be 40. Father Time, the only undefeated entity in sports, eat your heart out, Miami Dolphins. Only thing that's put up wins consistently is Father Time. But part of the problem for Evgeni Malkin the last few years has been he has had a revolving door of line mates. And yes, of course, Sidney Crosby always gets the pick of the litter. And then there's Evgeni Malkin begging for scraps. So you looked at what could happen this year. Would it bring a bounce back? We'll see. But having stability next year should really help Evgeni Malkin.
Well, Pat, let's not say he's going to be 40 yet. He's turning 39 in a few weeks. We don't have to say that he's 40 just yet. Let's save that.
Hunter, you're not in your 30s yet. You don't understand how little time matters once you cross that threshold. It's just another year. But I digress. Go on.
I'll be 28 this year. It's getting scary that I'm going to be 30 in the next almost less than 2.5 years now. But whatever. It's okay. Once I turn 30, I think I'll officially be old at that point. But yes, Malkin is going into his age 39 season. It could be his last NHL season with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I wrote about this for the Hockey News, saying that, I think if you look at the roster right now on July 9th at 11:50 a.m., he should have better line mates going into next season. And I'll honestly even say that even if one of Rust or Raquel gets moved. Pat, I assume that you read the whole article. And outside of playing 117 minutes with Crosby and Raquel on the top line, do you know who he spent the most amount of even strength minutes with on his line last year, the two players?
When I read this, I shook my head. I'm going to make you say it.
Michael Bunting and Cody Glass. And I'm not trying to disrespect these two players. Michael Bunting was a lot of fun down the stretch after he was part of the Jake Gensel trade. They moved him as part of the Tommy Novak trade. Cody Glass, I like that they took a chance on him. He played really well for the Devils after the Penguins traded him around the deadline, and he's staying with them. So I will never have any bad things to say about them. That would be ridiculous if I did.
I don't want to. I am going to interrupt you. I was going to say I don't want to interrupt you, but guess what? I'm doing just that. But the thing I will add to this, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping on a point you were going to make, is I liked Bunting with Malkin. I thought those two had a lot of really good chemistry. The problem was there wasn't, and we know that Sullivan loved pairings. He loved setting up lines as it's a duo, and then we'll find the third member as best we can. Bunting and Malkin had good chemistry, as Malkin has continued to be an underrated playmaker in his day. He does not get the credit I think he deserves for being able to dish the puck. Michael Bunting is a good straight line forward player, goes to the net, forechecks hard, is a great screen in front, even whether it's even strength or power play. The problem was they could never find that third member of the line. Glass had it in times, but not consistently enough. And then you go through everybody else that they tried to pair them with. You didn't need to get a Rocket Richard winner, but you needed a finisher, and they could never find a finisher for that line.
And also at the same time, Bunting was just really inconsistent for the Penguins last season. Remember, he had that disastrous start. Sullivan was, putting him down in the lineup and all that. So it felt like Gino just had the revolving door of wingers throughout the entirety of last season. You can say the same thing for the season prior to that as well. Now going into this season, at least right now, he will have an opportunity to have better and more productive wingers, starting with Ville Koivunen. They only played 6 games together down the stretch, but the early returns are really good. I put the underlying numbers in the article, a couple of them here. I'll just say when they were nice together, they had 55% of the scoring chances and 60% of the high danger chances. They also could look to maybe have Tommy Novak on the line. Remember, the Penguins only saw 2 games of Tommy Novak before he got hurt against the Vegas Golden Knights in March. And I know the Penguins see him as a center, but I could also see them being like, hey, let's put you with Evgeni Malkin. We like your vision on the ice. We like how you carry the puck in transition. We like how you are able to snipe the puck home. Like he's a career 15.2% shooter. You add all those elements, could be a solid fit on Evgeni Malkin's line. Obviously, right now, they still have Rickard Rakell and Brian Russ. Maybe you put one of those two on Gino's line. So there's plenty of options, at least right now, for Evgeni Malkin. The fact that he had 16 goals and 50 points last season, considering the revolving door of wingers, and he missed 14 games, it's kind of a miracle. He was on a 60-point pace had he not gotten hurt. And he easily would have had 20-plus goals if he did not get hurt and had better line mates. So I think if he's able to stay a bit more healthy for next season, have better, more productive wingers, I think you can see him have, a 20-goal, 60 to 65-point season next year.
The other thing, and this is a little bit of wish casting, and it's a little bit of hoping that our good pal Kyle Dubas does listen to this show, because I have my suspicions he might listen to this show, but we're not going to talk about that right now. I also would like to see Dan Muse give some of the young guys a shot with Sid. I think we saw McGroarty has some chemistry with Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't mind seeing Koivunen get a look there as well. And that would give Evgeni Malkin a chance to play with Rust, who we know he has some chemistry with. Same thing with Rickard Rakell. And we have said it on the show. I do believe Dan Muse is going to be the mad scientist next year.
Yeah.
He's not going to try to just lock guys in together forever. I do want him to give young guys more of a runway, but that also means trying out new combinations, trying new lines, trying new elements. And if some of those young guys get a shot with 87, The beneficiary is 71, getting your Rusts, your Rakels, even Manthas at times on his line, and that could jumpstart him. Again, I don't foresee Evgeni Malkin having I know that our rundown here on the show, if you're watching us on YouTube, says Gino could have a bounce back. I don't see him turning into an 80-some point player, but getting back into the 60s, the 70s, if he's got better quality line mates, I totally can see that happening.
Yeah, I think that's very realistic. Again, I know some people are down on Gino. I get it to an extent. He's going to be 39. He's not what he used to be. But again, if he had better line mates last year, I think he's easily a 20-goal, 60-point guy, especially if he stays healthy a little bit more. You saw that he was setting up quality chances when he was healthy and also getting quality chances himself. Puck just wasn't going in the back of the net. He just didn't have some of the more consistent finishers on his line. As of right now, he will have that ability to have more consistent finishers on his line. I'm just curious to see what head coach Dan Muse does. So that was the main reason why I wanted to write that article. If you want to check out the whole thing, you can go to the Hockey News and check it out and all that good stuff.
It's absolutely worth your time. Hunter, as expected, absolutely crushing it as he begins his journey with the Hockey News. Make sure you're following him on there, following him on social media, and of course, following our show on social media or wherever you get your podcast. That is going to do it for the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. In case you are unaware, we'll say it one more time. This is our final week of Monday through Friday daily episodes. Next week, we will go down to 3 episodes per week. We're going to try to hit the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule as best we can. But obviously, if news breaks, if we're able to get a fun guest, we might do an episode on a Tuesday or a Thursday, or maybe even something like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Who knows? We'll see what happens in the off season. But as always, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to us yap about hockey. We will be back with a brand new episode for you on Thursday. So thanks again for listening. For Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. We'll talk to you on Thursday.